There's also a lot of reports and opinion pieces on social innovation. One thing we do on the platform, we want to address this kind of relationship between business and society, and which social innovation and sustainability issues generally try to do. So that's what I'm going to try to do today. I'm going to try to unpack some of the narratives we have around business and some of the narratives we have about marketing. Because before we can start building sort of stories about sustainability and building better brands, we need to sort of unpack some of the narratives we ourselves follow in business and in marketing. And that can sort of, I think, is a really important foundation for having a much more constructive dialogue and progressing forward. And one of the things in around business, the narratives we have around business, is rooted in, really deeply rooted in Western thinking. And that's a differentiation between economics and culture, between economics and society, which goes back quite a long time. And so there are certain figures in business world that have sort of propagated that differentiation. And actually, I really believe created a lot of difficulty for us in this generation around having a more constructive dialogue. So I want to address a couple of those people. One of them is Milton Friedman, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. Milton Friedman was a Nobel Prize winner in economics in 1976. Goes back quite a while, and he's had an incredible influence over modern day politics and economics. Back in 1962, he wrote, "There is one and only one social responsibility of a business, to use its resources and engage in activities designed to increase its profit, so long as it stays within the rules of the game," which is to say, engages in open and free competition without deception or fraud. This is a very contentious statement, but it's been adopted by many business leaders as a means to guide their business. It's been adopted by many investors as a means to evaluate businesses for a long period of time. And there's another guy that came along, Yunus, who in the social innovation, social enterprise space is somewhat idolized. I'm not sure if you're all familiar with him. He's pioneered microfinance and many other things. And I don't have the same kind of enthusiasm for some of his thinking as many of my colleagues do. And I'd just like to explain that. He writes, he said the purpose of so he talks about social business a lot. He said the purpose of a social business is that the investment should be purely to achieve one or more social objectives through the operation of the company. No personal gain is desired by the investor. And he elaborates. Why does he sort of say this? Because he says when you mix profit and social benefit, it gets complicated for the CEO. His thinking process gets clouded. That may be right, and he may be getting clouded, but what we see here is that reinforcement of this differentiation between society and economics, society and financial goals, which I think is problematic. So both Friedman and Muhammad Yunus come from the same space. They think in the very similar terms. But I wonder, are societal benefits and profits really mutually exclusive? And my answer is, I think I'll be okay. My answer is no. And my reasoning for that, I'll actually draw on some J.P. Morgan, which is one of the kind of giants of modern day capitalism. Even J.P. Morgan they try to incorporate ESG, so environmental social governance factors, into their analysis of investments, with the primary goal of delivering exceptional investment returns, financial returns. They believe that ESG objectives and financial goals are not mutually exclusive, like Milton Friedman or like Mohammed Yunus would suggest. And this is a growing trend. It's not only J.P. Morgan. Between 2015 and 2016, investments, sustainable impact investments grew by 33% in the US. And now 1/5 of all assets under management in the US have an environmental and social governance strategies. This is a major shift which is taking place in the global economy. Now it's partly being driven by millennials. I usually wouldn't give them much credit, but in this case, they're making a particular impact. 84% of millennials are interested in sustainable investment. They're twice as likely to invest in companies or funds that focus on specific social and environmental outcomes. And millennials are the future of investment, they're the future of the global workforce. They are the generation which are going to inherit the wealth of the baby boomer generation. But why a lot of these companies and why investment asset management firms are investing in these kinds of businesses is because there is a clear connection between societal benefits and profit. So just let me look at a couple of factors. So there is a lot of research has been done over the last 5 to 10 years trying to substantiate this claim, perspective. Himwani's study showed that there's a relatively strong correlation between a measure of brand strength and a measure of a company's sustainability. Unilever have discovered the same thing. Unilever's developed an assortment of brands they call sustainable living brands. They are growing at 46% faster than all other Unilever brands. It's a great indicator of the power of sustainable brands. However, I think there's some conditions to this, which has been shown by a Harvard Business School study. There needs to be alignment between sustainability practices and a company's business strategy. And that alignment needs to occur at a level of marketing, value chain management, and other productivity factors. If you're going to have a company be evaluated in a positive terms by the stock market. In the stock market, they're looking for that relationship. That's very important to be able to demonstrate. However, there's a bit of a missed opportunity in Thailand. Dr. Rajanakorn's PhD explored, interviewed hundreds of executives and managers working in CSR and sustainability. And what they realized in Thailand, realized in Thailand, executives and managers see CSR and sustainability as a civic duty, something, a merit-making activity you could say. So there's very little alignment with the company's business strategy. And this is a missed opportunity in a number of ways. Because brand societal benefits and your sustainability strategy can have a major impact on your branding, which is really what we're going to talk to. Neil's going to give a lot of attention to. But let me just sort of clarify some of the benefits you gain from creating an alignment. This is based on a Harvest group study covering 1,500 global brands across 33 countries. 300,000 people participated in the study. And they ranked companies based on their meaningfulness. The companies, when they can increase their meaningfulness by 10%, can give a price premium, increase in price premium of 12%, and increase in intent to purchase by 10%, by increasing consumer advocacy by another 7%. And what we see is 22 of the 30 top companies in the world, I should say 22 of the 30 most meaningful companies in the world, brands, gain their meaningfulness, you could say, by being perceived as companies that contribute to collective well-being. Let me just give a little bit of a focus to a Thai case study. This is a company that Sasin, I'm quite familiar with, as I've lived in some of their buildings, and they also did a report for UNICEF around the real estate market industry in Thailand. What the Sun City does is very interesting. They contribute a lot in terms of investment into the well-being of their key stakeholders. And their key stakeholders being the people who construct the buildings, the migrant workers from Myanmar and Cambodia who come here with their families and help Sun City build all the condominiums you see around Bangkok. They have made them identified them as key stakeholders and work hard at improving the well-being of children and families of those migrant workers. At the same time, you can see they're a very popular company to invest in. Among their top 10 shareholders are subsidiaries of UBS, JP Morgan Chase, Northern Trust, Noki Financial Group of Finland, Bank of Norway, State Street, Bank of New York Mellon. Major asset management firms from around the world. You do not get the Bank of Norway investing in your company unless you have a very reputable history, track record. It's not just investors who look at Sun City in these terms. They have been ranked the most admired real estate company in Thailand for the past 4 years, and also considered one of the most trusted real estate companies in the country. And one of the reasons they have that trust and have that admiration is their commitment to the support and welfare of people that are part of their sort of value chain. So not only do you gain a lot from your brand position, your admiration, your trust in your brand, but you also can improve employee engagement. So let me just sort of clarify the value of employee engagement. A global Gallup study found that companies with a highly engaged employees outperform their peers by 147%. That's no small number. However, Thailand at the moment, you see only 14% of employees who could be considered or characterize themselves as engaged in their work. So this is a major missed opportunity. Let me return a little bit to millennials again. And Neil will have a hard time later about putting millennials in one big bracket. But for the purpose of the argument. All right. Millennials stay longer and are more satisfied with companies that give greater emphasis to their non-financial performance and focus on their social impact. Organizations with high levels of employee satisfaction are also organizations in which millennials have a much greater tendency to report the following: a culture of mutual support and tolerance, a strong sense of purpose beyond financial success, a strong commitment to equality and inclusiveness. So if we're going to engage this new generation of workers, millennials, we need to which are going to dominate the current workforce and the workforce to come. We need to align our business strategy with our societal impact goals. And then we need to communicate those goals. And there are three stakeholders we need, as this I'm trying to lay out, there are three important stakeholders. Investors, consumers, employees. They're all looking for, trying to identify companies' societal impact and understand the alignment with the business strategy. And stories, developing stories around your business, around your brand, is a key medium for delivering a communication message. However, let me go back to my first point. If we're going to do this, we're going to build this alignment and communicate authentic, relevant stories. We need to acknowledge something, which is that marketing as well as business practice is both economic, cultural, and social. You cannot differentiate the two. And when I say that, I'm just not talking about the outcomes. Right? I'm talking about a process where we come up with stories. It's also a social process. So marketers not only tell stories, and they not only express cultural values, which is something we often neglect, and something they do. They're also influenced by stories. So that's what I'm going to reflect on a little bit before I hand it over to Neil. So a little bit around stories and their sort of intrinsic role in our lives. I guess some of you have read the work of Yuval Harari, at least watched some of his YouTube videos. Sapiens, Homo Deus, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. If you haven't read them, I highly recommend them. Now, one of the points that underpins Yuval Harari's work is that as humans, we kind of operate with three layers of reality. First is objective reality. That objective reality is something we share with other animals, we share with chimpanzees, in this case I think they're Japanese snow monkeys. And objective reality, that's something we experience heat, we experience cold, we experience wind. These are sort of elements of nature that we all experience, the animal world experiences. There's also a subjective reality. This can be understood in different ways, but in this case he refers to our emotions. Animals experience emotions too, things like fear, anxiety, excitement, sadness. Anyone who has a dog, you'll know that they experience feelings of excitement and sadness, right? Anxiety, fear. Then there is a third layer of reality. This makes us unique. It's the fictitious reality of narratives and stories. And it's our capacity to speak and use language which gives us this capacity, ability to experience this third layer, the fictitious reality. And the fictitious layer reality means that we've been able to create stories and myths about the world and frame the world in terms of stories. So we create stories about gods, spirits, kings, queens, emperors, but we also create stories about brands, we create stories about companies, we create stories about technologies, we create stories about what the future might be like. And these stories can be very powerful. And one of the points Harari makes is this ability for storytelling has enabled us to achieve and cooperate in great numbers, right? Because we can come under and follow a common story. The stories can also be dangerous in the sense that they can give us we can actually create false stories about people, populations, constitute some stereotypes about people. So there's a danger that stories can be disconnected from reality. just going to give a little bit of some evidence, some story gaps or perception gaps. And there's really been some great work come out recently around how, I guess you could say, these gaps in information, gaps between how we see the world and reality. And there's going to be more of these studies because of this sort of era of disinformation that we live in. So this is a major study. I think they covered quite a few countries. Thailand was not included in this study, so I'm going to pick on one of our neighbours, some of our neighbours, Indonesia and the Philippines. When they asked the respondents in this study, out of every 100 people in Indonesia or the Philippines, about how many do you think own a smartphone? What did the respondents say? In the case of Indonesia, they said 85. Reality was 21. The Philippines was very similar. They said 86. Reality was 23. Similar story with Facebook. They asked a similar question. Out of 100 people aged 13 and over, about how many do you think have a Facebook account? 81 in Indonesia said they have a Facebook account. 22, the actual number is 22. Philippines very similar. Same story in terms of car ownership. What could be the problem here? Yeah, Chris?
It all happened.
Sorry?
It all happened.
The people that are answering the questions all have smartphones, right? Or Facebook account, drive a car. And that's because probably the research, like Neil would be familiar with this, probably focused on people living in the city. Didn't get out and explore people in remote areas of Indonesia and the Philippines, who might give a very different perspective. Right? And so that's one of the dangers. And that's some danger of us as people in business and marketers who apply the same perspective. We see the world through our very narrow perspective, our narrow, maybe city, urban, middle class view of things. And Unilever, which is really kind of a somewhat modern-day pioneer of social thinking differently about marketing, they did a study of their own marketing practices. They did a study which concluded that their own marketing practices were full of biases, narratives about women and families which were disconnected from the way the consumers of Unilever products actually perceive themselves or wanted to be portrayed by Unilever. Just a couple of examples. Just that 3% of ads, Unilever ads featuring women, featured women in managerial professional roles. Almost all women thought they were being presented as sex symbols. Almost a third, 30% said adverts showed women as perceived by men, which is probably exactly the reality. Advertising companies, marketing agencies are dominated by men, and they'll present a male version of the world in their advertising. But what this study showed was, showed that it can be disadvantaged, it can be very dangerous. Your own stereotypes can be very disadvantaged. It can disadvantage your ability to market and tell an authentic story which resonates with your target audience. And this is another study conducted by a media agency trying to unpack and to look at some of the biases within a media agency. It's a media advertising agency. And the left side shows, the red and the blue line shows what are the modern mainstream values of the mainstream population in the UK. The red line shows the values of people working in a media advertising agency. Now they're different. Okay, we know that they're not going to be exactly not going to be the same. But the bigger problem is on the left. again, the blue line shows the values of the modern mainstream in the UK. The dotted red line shows the media agency's perception of the modern mainstream values. And there we see a huge gap. The media agencies, the advertising agencies, have a very distorted view and understanding of how the modern mainstream thinks.
They're much more boring than we think they are.
Yes. Okay, so my PhD was actually on the mobile phone market in Cambodia, and I'm not going to go into this much because the previous presentation here went into it. But what I uncovered in that study of the mobile phone market was that companies themselves were doing themselves a great disservice because they had a very disconnected understanding of what the modern Cambodian population was really like. Right? They saw the Cambodian population through a very narrow prism of the Phnom Penh middle class, which is completely different from the mainstream population. And because of that distorted view, they missed out on both a massive financial opportunity, business opportunity to give products to the rural population, and they missed out on providing immense societal benefits of delivering sort of empowering technology to the rural population. Fortunately, another company stepped in and filled those roles, but a lot of companies missed out and went bankrupt in the process because they didn't have a clear understanding of the modern day Cambodian population. They applied their sort of urban middle class narratives around about what the rest of the population was like, which was fundamentally wrong. So, we have trouble seeing the water around us. It's like fish in a tank. Which brings me to the end nearly. And it's the first rule of marketing. First rule of marketing is you are not the market. And you are not the investor, you are not the employee. If you're going to go about understanding and building sustainable stories and authentic stories which resonate with the population, you have to acknowledge that your perspective in the world is not going to be the one which is going to resonate. It's not your story which matters, right? It's a story which resonates with the target audience. So on that note, I'm going to hand it over to Neil, because Neil's the consumer researcher and has developed some fantastic tools and methodology around understanding people, understanding consumers, and building interesting stories, authentic stories which resonate with people. Hence the need for critical research. Okay, thank you. Any questions for that? Yeah, please.
Has any research been done, comparative research between companies that are doing these sorts of things in Thailand versus the ones that aren't, to show the performance difference?
Very little. I haven't been able to find it. I did a lot of research over the last, especially last year for the project connected to Sasin here. There's very little research. Unfortunately, yeah. A lot of other markets, say you go to the US and Japan, a lot of research is being done on looking at their, trying to understand the correlation between business performance and the company's CSR activities, and the alignment between those CSR activities and business and the company strategy. That research is yet to be done in a very in-depth way. One piece of research that I showed you there goes back to 2012. It's the only sort of substantial study I found on CSR activities at that level.
Can I ask you, what was the significance of that last movie clip picture you had?
Oh, well, you don't.
I don't know the movie.
Oh, you don't know the movie, sorry. It's a story that doesn't resonate.
I knew it had to be significant somehow.
Well, The first rule of Fight Club is.
Oh, is that Fight Club?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
okay, okay.
I was just using that.
Yeah,
that line. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I want to ask a question about what for me is very critical about, and I've been involved with these things also practically as a manufacturer, but also with as an academic. Culture is something that is human, it is a self-conscious activity. And as a self-conscious activity, a lot of people, when they look at big American brands claiming that they have social responsibilities, you kind of take it with a grain of salt.
Right.
It's a marketing strategy. Instead of investing more in ads, you'll invest maybe less in helping a school in an African village, which is cheap, but you can use it for a lot of good PR. There is a lot of skepticism about it, and I talk to a lot of people that don't buy it so easily, especially when you have existing brands claiming it after, when you see an ad of Exxon Mobil showing its dedication to environmental protection, you want to puke. I mean, you do. And that's the truth. So the question of authenticity, of people doubting this, is a main issue. How to get over that?
Well, I think in sort of sewing sustainability into the DNA or fabric of the organization, it makes it much easier to tell an authentic story. And the consumers will see that. They see that's really part of the organization. And those waste.
Daniel's talk reminded me of two key principles of storytelling, which weren't in my talk, so I'll mention it. The first one is storytelling is all about having empathy, seeing the world from the central character's point of view. Also, by the way, that's what research is essentially. And that includes the cultural part, which is one of the things that I focus on that. The second key principle that storytellers will tell you is show, don't tell. You show your character by what you do, not by what you say. How you react to events in the story is the way that you show someone's true character, not through the dialogues, what they do, how they react to things, particularly obviously when they go wrong. Key principles, and that's kind of what you're talking about.
I did one project like that in my past in Ethiopia with arts, and I had a person that was really into it. If I was doing it myself, it would be much more difficult. I had an Austrian designer really is involved in these things. But I think there is a sense of might believe more new companies that are getting into the market with that identity kind of built into the DNA, that somebody who doesn't give shit about anybody except profit, and now he claims that he's a humanitarian. I think there's a question here of who do you believe, not only about how they present empathy or how they present and how they follow up.
No.
Smokers do turn into non-smokers, so
And then they become more vehement in
so
smoking.
you can't have one and then be the other.
Yeah. Okay. So briefly about myself. So a lot of my work is using human and cultural psychology. So big emphasis on the culture because I think it's really important and generally pretty underlooked in marketing and branding and in research. And using that to help brands build better experiences. Because again, sort of show, don't tell. To me, branding is not about what messages you put out, it's about what you do and how someone actually experiences you. And around that, I do quite a lot of training around storytelling, which is where the materials today come from, and around things like semiotics and cross-cultural differences and experience design, as well as research. So that's kind of what I do for a living. And storytelling is a big part of that, I think, in terms of understanding individual consumer stories. So that's the empathy part. It's a very, very important part. To then, how do brands turn that into a story? How do I tell that story? No right to report. It's important to communicate. Because in reality, people aren't very receptive to numbers and data and statistics, but they are receptive to stories, to emotion. And you mentioned the word meaning, I think, a few times in your presentation. So meaning is at the heart of stories. Meaning is at the heart of brands and what brands are about. And that's, often we think of meaning as something that's intangible, but I think it's also very tangible. So that's why I'm so interested in the senses as well, and how they convey meaning. But let me get to the story. So cover stories are pretty fundamental to human thought. I'm not going to give you a psychology 101 on this. Ursula Le Guin is a great writer and writes a lot about stories and storytelling. This is a truth. It's something that connects all human cultures, all human societies, and that's one of the things I'm going to get to. I'm going to talk about this horrible word, archetypes. But essentially what it is there are patterns of meaning that you see across all different cultures, across all different societies, across all different languages. And when you tap into them, you're tapping into universal truths. So if you tell a story that has an archetypal pattern, it resonates because people already know that, they've already experienced that. And good innovation is about 80% familiarity and 20% new things. And that's so using those archetypes, that gives the familiarity on which you can build innovation. So I'm going to talk about these archetypes in two ways, depending on how we get on for time. First piece, I'm going to talk about archetypal plots and structures, how stories are actually structured and how they work. And then I'm going to talk about archetypal characters. So different people and how different people work and what motivates them. And I really much want you to think about that in terms of characteristics and human universals, not in terms of stereotypes. So some of you nodded when you saw this. I assume that some of you are familiar with The Hero's Journey. Joseph Campbell, very good book to read. As you'll see, this guy is amazing. I don't know, has anyone ever watched him talking? There's lots of YouTube videos. I mean, he knew more about mythology across the whole world than anyone who's ever lived, I'm pretty sure. He just had this amazing encyclopedic knowledge, which has been very, very... he was a student of Carl Jung, and he's also been very influential in a lot of modern kind of filmmaking and storytelling. But The Hero's Journey is essentially what he said was this kind of... This is the single archetypal plot that underlies every story in the world. Full stop. He wrote volumes and volumes about how it worked. So we get this person who eventually becomes a hero, and they get called and they go into this adventure, different world.
Challenge.
Yeah, challenge.
Difficulties,
challenges, but also life-threatening in some cases.
Yes.
And ultimately there's a transformation, and then they come back and they get rewarded. Yeah. Okay. So one story, and so basically every film you've ever seen essentially follows that. I'm going to try and break it down a little bit more granularly. But I'm hoping, how many of you have seen at least one of the Star Wars films?
Oh,
So this is Star Wars 4, which is the first one ever, A New Hope. But if you've watched Star Wars 7, which was the kind of franchise relaunch, it is exactly the same as Star Wars. Honestly, if you go through the films, scene by scene, it has exactly the same structure. And it follows the hero's journey. Absolutely to the letter. And I'm not going to go through the details, but it's a great film. But it's George Lucas studied with Joseph Cameron.
oh really?
Yeah. So he was very influenced by the hero's journey. He knew it. But maybe things aren't quite that simple. So actually, I'm going to break this down into 7 different stories. Someone else wrote about. The book is called 7 Basic Plots, and I've forgotten the name of it. I'll look it up. But that's not such an easy read because it's like a book that's like this thick.
What's the name?
7 Basic Plots.
So,
I think it's Christopher Booker or Christopher something like that. I'll check it out. And he came out with these 7 plot structures. Now, in ancient Greece, you basically have tragedy and comedy. Those are the 2. He says there are 7. So number 1 is, I'll go through them very quickly. I haven't got time to go through them in detail. You kind of recognize them when you see them. Overcoming the monster, number 1. Rags to riches, number 2. The quest, number 3. The voyage and return is number 4. Tragedy, comedy, and rebirth. And rebirth is essentially comedy. Sorry. Rebirth is essentially tragedy with a happy ending. Yeah, you'll see this. Overcoming the monster. So every James Bond plot is overcoming the monster. As are many myths and fairy tales. When you kill a dragon, that's essentially overcoming the monster. Do you have dragons in Thai mythology? Or equivalents?
Naga.
Naga.
I have women that are ocean butterflies. Poor man. Well, I don't need. Kind of tragic.
Yeah. But think about monster in its kind of loosest sense. And this comes to sustainability in part and some of the challenges we face. When you think about conflict in story, it can come from different levels, and I generally look at 3 levels. One is the world outside you. I'll show you a bit more about this in a minute. One is like immediate, it's a monster, so it's Bane. In the case of The Dark Knight Rises, if you've seen that film, or is some other human adversary. But there's a 3rd level which can come from within inside you. So the reason I put Batman here is he basically, in this film, and to some extent the others, he has challenges at 3 levels. So he's battling himself, number 1, and he's kind of inner demons. He's battling Bane or the Joker or whoever the character is in the film. And in this film, he's also battling Gotham City. He's kind of fighting these battles at 3 different levels. And this to put a bit more flesh on it is how you can sometimes think about this. And I think this is obviously when we talk about sustainability stories, we often think about this kind of 3rd level, about the environment or society, how we relate to the government, politics, etc., etc. But there are other issues of sustainability as well. Families, friends, as well as psychological sustainability, managing ourselves. throw in a few dragon quotes as I go through this one. This is about fairy tales. The meaning of stories is not necessarily literal, but it is real. It's about what you can learn from how someone else, and this is has been shown to be, like in modern society, and a good example of this, in modern society we tend to get a bit squeamish about some of the older fairy tales, like the Grimm's fairy tales kind of get sanitized a bit. Some of them are actually quite brutal. But the research shows that actually children aren't as kind of upset by some of this as you might think. And it actually helps them to learn how to deal with issues, and deal with conflict, and deal with a parent dying or whatever. It's very typical in a fairy tale that a young child loses their parents. The fairy tale teaches how they can cope and grow up. So that's one of the big functions of fairy tales. So plot number 2. This is a very quick overview. Rags to riches. So you all know Cinderella, yeah? Do you know this? So this is the Thai version. I'm told this is the Thai version of Cinderella. And actually Cinderella is one of the more interesting of the fairy tales. Because I can't remember, there are literally hundreds of versions of Cinderella. The Chinese have a version, the French have a version, the Thai. And there's probably more than one version in Taiwan. Can you think of a modern version?
Julia Roberts in
Okay. Yeah. Can you think of one that's less conventional?
less conventional.
Cartoon. I'll help. Shrek is one. That's essentially a Cinderella story. Or then have you seen Ratatouille?
Of course.
That's a Cinderella story. With a rat rather than a beautiful bird. Beautiful one.
Actually, you're overcoming the monster.
Yeah, so you're in a terrible situation. You try and work your way out of it. Generally in that plot, about halfway through, like Cinderella, she meets the prince, or you see, well, maybe there's this really bright future, and then something gets in the way that eventually you overcome it. That's the Cinderella plot. Quest. This is about going on a journey. Intermediate quest, you go on a journey, so the first part of the story is a journey, and then you have challenges and big stories. There's typically 3 challenges that you have to work. Very common. So Lord of the Rings is an example of this kind of story. Indiana Jones is very much. There are others, we'll come back. 4th is Voyage and Return. So this is very, very common in fairy tales. You go out into some unknown, you have an adventure, then you come back to something. That's typical child's fairy tale. So I don't know, these are other English versions, but a kind of more interesting modern version. Except there's a world within a world within a but it's basically using that plot structure. And it's like, so like in Alice in Wonderland, by the way, and this is very common, or in Lion the Witch and the Wardrobe, the protagonist, they fall asleep. Or they have a dream and then they go into the other world. So it's kind of one of the main things of research.
Is this a new movie? I haven't seen it.
Yeah, oh, you should see it. It's a fantastic film. Christopher Nolan, one of the probably one of the best. One of my favourites. Comedy. Sorry, I flipped around comedy and tragedy. Tragedy and comedy is not just about funny ha-ha. My favourite comedy, I'm sure you're happy with that. which has just been re-released. But this is more an explanation of comedy. Comedy is about confusion. It's when you have this mess and people misunderstand other people, or in Shakespeare and in Greek tragedy, Greek comedy, there's a lot of cross-dressing and twin brothers and twin sisters. There's mistaken identities, and that's kind of, it's all about confusion, that people don't understand what's going on. But you can get that in unfunny context as well. So, if any of you have read Pride and Prejudice, that's a comedy. Essentially, most of that story is about confusion and misunderstanding. And eventually, people know what's really going on. You get a happy ending. That's a comedy. Tragedy. So you all know some of the Trying to Fly to the Sun. Any of you seen Hamlet? Many of the Shakespeare plays and Greek plays and so on. You get modern versions. It's not so common in the Black Swan. Anyone see Black Swan? That's a tragedy. It's an example of someone who basically goes too far. The hubris and nemesis. Now, I meant to do this as I went through, but thinking about these plots we've done so far, we'll come on to read them. Do any of them make you think of sustainability stories, or any specific sustainability stories? Obviously, tragedy is one that comes to mind, which is why I stopped here. If you read the recent climate report, you could read that as a tragedy.
All the ones about quests.
Yeah?
It's all about, either the corporations or the dragons or the fight against the elements. It's all about struggles. Like movies like, I don't know what his name. When you have floods, when you have natural disasters, there are all kinds of struggles against something big and terrible.
Any others?
The day after.
Can you think of rags to riches as a sustainability story? Or any brand that uses that kind of story?
I work in waste to value, so I'm starting a social enterprise that takes waste plastic and makes 3D printing from it.
Okay. So it's kind of rags to riches, yeah. That's good. Overcoming a monster? Do you think that could be a sustainability story?
But rags to riches, it's more difficult for me to see how it works unless it's about taking something that is disposed, like you mentioned there, Chris. Well, it would kind of be repetitive. That would probably.
Well, there's one other, there's one other thing about rebirth. So, transformation. So this is essentially a tragedy story where there's a transformation towards the end and a happy end. So something happens to change. Now, so how many of you know Hamlet? Did you know that The Lion King is based on Hamlet? Except there's a happy ending. There's this change where he has this vision with the monkey, yeah? And then he goes back to Hamlet. So it's kind of like sort of slight transformational intervention to change the direction of the story. And that's very typical of the rebirth story. kind of get into the time of year, and again, if you come across a Christmas Carol, that's a rebirth story. So basically, the kind of story of Scrooge's life is transformed by these three ghosts that appear in front of him. Again, the magic number 3. 3 is very common. One of my,
Why queen? Here?
it just seems to be a bit of a magical number in stories. It also, well, I mean, it's been shown to work. So, like, if you listen to people like GFK or really good speakers, they typically report next 3 points. It tends to be remembered very well by the human brain.
Right.
If you go to 4, it's kind of less catchy. You know, like, there's some psychology there.
We used to have a prime minister.
That's why-
Everything is true.
Yeah, stories have 3 acts. Yeah. One of my favourite stories in Magic Flute is a lot of the 3 Trials. That's pretty common, and you'll see that in a lot of mythology. You'll get in the quest type story, you'll get this journey, and then there are 3 increasingly kind of brutal trials. And then there's the end. So yeah, sustainability. What kind of stories might be, or when I think of the climate one, I think these 2 are like parallel stories in some ways. You know, it's getting to the point where in this report we say if you don't do something in the next 10 years, this is what's going to happen.
The new tragedy of rebirth or comedy?
Tragedy of rebirth.
Right.
And so in The Lion King, one of the songs is a circle of life, yes, one of the concepts, one of the songs. And it kind of made me think of this study I did this year for the Irish Food Board in Indonesia and Malaysia, which was all about what's the meaning of dairy. Because they want to sell the dairy products and dairy ingredients into countries in Asia. No, what does dairy actually mean to them? And the conclusion was there was 3 kind of key areas, which was taste, vitality, and sort of growth, or essentially the circle of life. You kind of see it here in some of these comments from people we talked to. Went to their homes, talked to them. They cooked a meal using some dairy ingredient or ingredients. But it's particularly interesting. So in Ireland is building a farming industry around sustainability. So all of the farms are gradually developing sustainability. And talked a lot with them. And talked about, particularly in Indonesia and Malaysia, the meaning of Islam and Islamic values, where nature is very important. So it's kind of a little bit different to Christianity. So in Islam, man is there to sort of tender and nurture nature, not to sort of have to name it. And so this was a long part of the discussion we had with the Irish people, was how do you build that kind of idea? Linking it to the local cultural values, and also to the things that people talk about, which is like dairy is a lifelong thing. They're most associated with young kids with people who are very old. It's kind of got that link, the link between mother and baby, and then we can go on and on. It kind of makes a very good link to this idea of sustainability in industry as well, and to the local cultural values. So that's kind of one slightly different aspect of sustainability. And to go back to this idea of is there one story, one plot, or are there many? And maybe Star Wars is a good example of this. You can actually, many stories have all of these plots going on. So in Star Wars, you have overcoming the monster for sure. Yeah? the monster being Darth Vader. For Luke, and this can be going on for different characters within the story. So for Luke, you might say, arguably, he's kind of on a spiritual story. Definitely it's a quest, and particularly when you look at this across the movies. There's elements of journey and elements of his trials and confrontations and obstacles. Voyage and Return, less arguable, but they did go back to the same point. There's definitely like at least one character is on this kind of plot arc or structure, tragedy. At some levels there is comedy because there's like an element of confusion in the middle of the story until you sort of get clarity into what's actually going on. And of course there is some sort of transformation elements, at least we see in some of the individual movies. And there's also an eighth plot structure which is rebellion, and appears in another film that I think is quite interesting because it has pretty much all these plot structures as a Hunger Games. It kind of pretty much has all of these. Working at different levels or for different characters within the story, following these different parts. It's kind of where I want to go to next is to talk about characters and archetypal characters. But first, just let me show you, if I simplify the monomyth of Joseph Campbell into 5 kind of words, there's a trigger. So nothing happens until something happens, is what I would place in message. So you have to have something that starts things moving. Then things get complicated. Then there's a crisis. And there's a climax. And there's a resolution. Which is typically a happy ending, but in a tragedy, it's not so happy. But that's at least it's a resolution. It's the simplest version I can find. But that's like a simple story. A bit more complicated for you, but this is a way to build stories. Think about the trigger, think about the events that then happen are following that until finally you get a resolution. And this is, I quite like this structure which I've used trying to teach storytelling in business. Once upon a time, ... every day, ... until one day, ... And because of that, and because of that, and because of that, until finally, and ever since then. Does that make sense? It's a very simple strategy.
It's what Aristotle called it at the beginning. It's a middle and an end.
Yeah,
It sounds very simple.
most of this wisdom is in Aristotle, by the way, I have to acknowledge that. So now I'll talk about the characters a little bit, and we've got time. So this is the heart of the issue of empathy, like I mentioned. It's a good way to think about stories as well. Stories have their heart a person, or it could be persons, or it could be a rat, or a green monster, or whatever. And they undergo some kind of transformational change in order to solve a problem, answer a question, meet some goal that they have, resolve an issue, or realize potential. So that's very much kind of that's what business do, isn't it? That's what businesses do. They solve problems, meet goals, resolve issues for their customers, and realize the potential of their opportunity. But at the heart of it, there has to be someone or something to change. So, in any story, things are never the same at the end as they are at the beginning. There's always a change. let's go back to Joseph Campbell. What he's alluding to here, he's thinking not just about the plot structure, but also the characters. So he basically he talks a lot about this. It's like if you look at Indian mythology, or you look at European mythology, or Native American mythology, a lot of the characters, they're wearing different costumes, but essentially they're the same. They have the same issues, same challenges, and they react to them the same way. So you have these kind of archetypal characters. And you see them wherever you go. And it comes back to the fact that there's so much consistency between cultures and kinds of stories that are told. And that's often because they come from the same root. And be careful what I say here, but if you look at a lot of Asian mythology, a lot of it goes back to Indian mythology, essentially. Shan came into Southeast Asia. So if you look at Indonesian mythology, it's very similar to Indian mythology, as is, dare I say it, Chinese. So does anyone know the character Sun Wukong? Monkey. So there's a character in Indian mythology called Hanuman. Sun Wukong is based on Hanuman. Allegedly. I'm sure the Chinese would say that Sun Wukong came first. But there's this real consistency and commonality in the types of characters that you see. He's a trickster character.
What is the story of Chinese monkey traveling to India to find scriptures?
And then
So
go
it's a
back.
story that is linked. We can go from the beginning.
But the trickster character, like in Japan, he's a fox, Kitsune, and so on. So in every country it's kind of different, but it's actually the same character.
Trickster is an archetype,
It's an archetype.
as you
Yeah, I'm going to talk about archetypes a lot. So a lot of my work revolves around archetypes. So, and we think about, obviously the central character in Star Wars, at least in the original ones, is Luke. And this is a framework that I use. It's essentially, although it's an archetypal framework, it's also, the reason that archetypes work is because they're based on basic human psychology, basic human universes. Some people care more about belonging, at least in some situations. Some people care more about being independent. Some people care more about control. Some people care more about freedom. So those are basic dimensions of most motivation models. And Luke kind of starts down here. It's basically an innocent child, essentially. Maybe like he doesn't stand out from anyone else, he's very different. He ends up, of course, being a hero. But this is important for this thinking about sustainability. Although there's a hero in every story, they need help. So if you look at the other characters, and I've picked out in Star Wars because kind of hopefully most people have seen it generally, there are all these other types of character that are also very common in mythology that appear, and they help the hero to achieve their goals. So there's like in most mythology, there's some kind of magician in the older stories who has this power to go ding and then something happens. So in modern stories, there might be a technological wizard rather than one with a wand. So in this case of Star Wars, R2-D2 is like a robot who always manages to find the plan or open the door or whatever it might be. So he's kind of like a technological wizard. He's a fixer. Then you have this character guru or a mentor or a guide who's a wise man or woman, usually a man for some reason, who is able to point and put the hero on their way. This is what you need to do. Teach them a few things as they go along. So obviously in Star Wars it starts with Obi-Wan and then it ends up with Yoda. There's a ruler character. In this case, it's just a sort of dark. There's a child. In the case of Star Wars, the child is the C-3PO, is the other computer. It's basically like a little child. Innocent. There's kind of like a protector or a caregiver. Now, Princess Leia actually has a few different roles in Star Wars, but she generally her central role is like protecting other people, looking after. She's the one who like looks after the rebel force and makes sure it's safe and so on. There's an interesting everyman character, which is the Wookiee. And if you watch the films, his kind of central motivation is he just wants to fit in with everyone else and be accepted as a normal person and not be any different. That's his drive. And then over here, Han Solo is kind of like this mix. He's like the explorer going out and finding new worlds, and he's quite rebellious, of course, as well. But he always comes back in the end. But he's very rebellious. So he's kind of playing with Indiana Jones in space. Essentially. So it's interesting how within this one story, this is not just doesn't just happen in Star Wars, it's true. You have a central character, you have all these other characters who are kind of helping that person in their way. And obviously working with them, they have different roles within the story as well. Lord of the Rings is another example. Hopefully many of you have seen. So obviously you've got a hero who's not really, he's actually really a sort of everyman, but kind of he ends up being a bit of a hero. You've got, Gandalf is kind of like, plays both the guru and the catalyst. He's like the magician, but he's also the mentor, the wise person. Obviously you have an evil ruler. You have a caregiver, so in a lot of mythology there's I don't say I'm not I'm talking about older stories. It's typically a young woman who gives shelter to someone while they're on their journey and protects them. That's a kind of very typical trope story. You've got the everyman, so this is kind of his brother, essentially, or his pal, who again, he just wants to fit in, be one of the crowd. There is a seducer. There are these two jokers. And then there's a Gollum here. He's kind of what is called a trickster character. So he's kind of combining a bit of rebel with a bit of joker in the sense that he's so typically trickster characters in this true of Kitsune and Sun Wukong and all these others. They're also often associated with being shapeshifters. So they change their form or their appearance. It's a very common thing in mythologies. So what he does is he kind of changes his shape and disappears underwater. Becomes invisible with the ring. It's a transformation. So this is the kind of structure that I use to think about this. And I'm going to go around, because I'm going to give you a testament. I'm going to show you some brands and see which archetypes they are. So, I'll go through them quickly. At the top we have the warrior. The warrior is about strength and power and independence and being courageous. Then you have the catalyst. So the catalyst is about transformation, confidence, charisma, magic. Now the guru characters, that's obviously all about being smart, being clever, being intelligent, being analytical. It's all about what you know and how you can control things through what you know. There's a ruler, so that's more about how you control things through sort of political power and structure and rules and laws and being responsible. Idealist, that's more about being innocent, being idealistic, being a bit of a dreamer, being faithful, so there's a sort of slightly religious element, or spiritual element. Tradition, if you're very traditional, This is basically, this is where you get your kind of comfort from things staying the same but not having to worry too much about it. So you kind of like this space. Caregiver is about care and protection and nurture, so very much associated with family, we're looking after other people. And I come back to this because I'm going to show you another example. Every man is basically about fitting in. So not standing out from the crowd, being the same as everyone else, being equal, having empathy for other people. Seducers, that's about love and intimacy and seduction. Joker is about fun, partying, enjoying yourself, being spontaneous. All of these are related to freedom on this side. So rebellion is a bit more openly about being free in the sense of being completely able to do whatever you want. So it's about being rebellious, sort of challenging the norm. Explorer is more about freedom in the sense of exploring the world, going out and discovering new things. It's got quite a physical element to it, so that's why it's related to the quest. As a plot structure, it's typically an explorer as well as a practice. And then the artist, that's more about exploring the mind, being creative, being innovative, refreshing your ideas, refreshing the world. So I'm going to show you 12 brand ads, and I want you all to shout out which archetype.
Just want to ask one question. So the right-hand side from actually seducer to artists are mostly characters that question the boundaries.
Yeah,
They're
they're more about change.
About change.
About change, about freedom, about self-expression.
Right. And the one on the left are more
About
concerned.
control, stability, conserving what's already there. And then there's interdependence, how you relate to other people. This is more about yourself, ego. So which archetype? Yes. You can, everyone is free to shout out, don't be shy. This is a bit more tricky. Think transformation.
Trickster. That shape.
This is a catalyst.
A cat.
So the point being, and this is a lot, there's a lot of ads around this. This is a Smirnoff. So you can see the world differently when you look through their bottom. So that's about transformation, a little bit magical. Sorry, that's a bit more tricky. I think the next one is easy. Yeah. This is, and that's very typical of news organizers. CNN have played along this for a long time. The BBC used to, although they've kind of changed a bit. A lot of market research organizations or consulting, McKinsey, IBM, they all play in this kind of role.
Guru?
Yeah. So IBM is smarter planet. McKinsey is all about what you know.
Seducer.
It's kind of a bit seducer and a bit joker. So Virgin are typically joking. If you read all their copy, they're all about having a fun experience. This is a bit seducer. So one of the things they introduced recently was that if you saw someone you liked in another seat, you can send them a message. This is a bit more, that's a bit more standard joking. So it's just having fun. A little bit surreal. Barbados, they're very old.
Warrior.
It's a little bit warrior, but I think it's more ruler. It's about being the boss and being in control. It's about control. There's a little bit of warrior. It's like, I'm better than you. I have a better razor. This is a very typical kind of premium, luxury brand kind of territory. Status.
Everyman?
Yeah. So one of the things that IKEA's kind of big thing is making good design affordable for everyone, so everyone can have a nice furniture.
Seducer.
You got that quite quickly.
Yeah. Explorer.
This is rebel.
Rebel.
It's about freedom. Just do it. You know, just do it. Some of it, this is not the most typical. Harley Davidson, some of their advertising is literally, you know, a lot of it's around the noise of the machine, and then you get these ads where they're like, guy goes up to the pet shop and ties all these chains to the dog cages, drives away and opens the doors for the dogs on the legs. It's all about freedom.
Caregiver.
Sorry?
Artist.
Yeah, it's the artist. The Lego is all about creative. This is Asterix, Obelix, and what's the dog's name? This is about using your imagination.
This
This is more idealist. Clue is in the name. And this, and the white colour, and everything else. No additives. Yeah, there's a bit of care as well. It's the natural thing.
Milk. Explorer, yeah.
This is the caregiver. This is all about protection. And it's all a cute baby, so it's caregiver or an instant. So, I mean, here's some of these brands you saw, some of them you didn't. I don't know if you're familiar. Any questions about any of these? Like I say, a lot of status kind of cars.
Questions.
Sorry?
I have a question. So, like, for example, in each archetypes, there will be like many competitors within it, right? How do you become like the number one at everything, every band, for example?
Well, that's a very long kind of answer type question from a brand point. I think typically when you talk to consumers, actually the example I'll show you is, if you look at a category or you look at a particular, what I would call a job, it's something that a consumer needs to do. There are multiple motivations. So there are multiple reasons. Sometimes there's a core category, but for many women, skincare and hair care are about taking care of the body and nurturing it and so on. But for some women, even skincare is about transformation because they want to look different. So transformation. If you look at color cosmetics, often it's here. Like for a lot of Asian women, actually, also quite a big element of this. It's just about having fun and experimenting and just trying new things. Just a bit more exploring those spaces. So typically in any category there are multiple motivations. You'll find so different brands might try and take different pieces of that. They don't necessarily just stick with one archetype either. They might have multiple archetypes, so they might have one core one for the overall brand and then a different product. Categories kind of have a secondary archetype, which they might play. So they might have an overall kind of brand image, but then like in-store promotional stuff, they might be playing to those kind of sub-archetypes. I mean, it depends. But I mean, to me, even if other brands are playing in the same space, you can always find a way to be distinctive. Usually the way to be distinctive is to find a local kind of cultural expression of that particular value. Because this is quite a generic value, so what does that mean in Thailand versus Indonesia versus Denmark? By the way, Denmark is actually a very Sweden. Denmark and Sweden are quite democratic kind of countries. It's an interesting story about Lego. Actually, I was reminded of it. I can't remember where you were talking about it at all. So it's about understanding local culture. So Lego comes from Denmark. That's why I'm kind of confusing it. And they have a particular way of advertising in Denmark, which is to show mother and father playing with the kid and playing with the Lego. It's great. When they went into France, it's a new market, they used the same tactic and competed. And the difference is that Denmark is a very democratic society. So it's very non-hierarchical. People see everyone as being equal. France, is there anyone from France? It's a little bit more hierarchical, and a little bit more status-driven. So in France, parents are here and children are here. So there's a kind of bit of a kind of cultural disconnect between that. So in France, as I understand when they entered the market, they changed the advertising to make kids playing with other kids. And they work fine because they're on it. So if you look at like work on cultural difference, there's a dimension called power distance. This is where France is relatively high on power distance. Denmark is quite low. That's the difference in these two societies. Feel free to. Does it make sense? Yeah.
Because when you talk about Denmark, Sweden is a small country, about 6 million people. And when you say it's very democratic, I'm not very agree with it. Because if you look at...
I meant it in the loosest sense of democratic.
Yeah, because if you look at this country, actually, you have 10, 15 families running the country. And the population will never run the country. Even if you are successful, you will never grow existentials. But they have a very, very good social that they give people their food. This is nuance.
Yeah, no.
And in France, of course, you're right, there's a lot of architects, etc. At some point, this is also like the past, and you make feel people they are free, etc. But people, even in France, if you are in this, you have more interactive social things, etc. You are not really involved. So rather than in Denmark, Sweden, it's very family oriented, connection, etc. You don't go much out of the box.
no, the point I'm making is you need to adapt to the cultures in the way.
Because afterward, actually, Lego has been very successful in France.
Yeah.
But it's also the way the mind, the way it is presented to the mind of people. In France, for example, it has been very successful because if you talk to parents who they buy Lego, they make the connection of buying Lego is good to develop the children's mind about creativity, etc. If you talk about Lego in the family in Denmark or Sweden, they say, yeah, it's, as you say, it's always presented with my, yeah, it's a game we play together with mom and dad.
It's a different,
Yeah.
different way to
And if you look at France, you know that French they push a lot for engineers. This is a trend.
Okay.
Yeah.
Of course, Thailand is quite high level. Thailand is relatively high level.
Distance, power, all
Yeah.
the way.
Anyway, sorry, that's the point I was making is different cultures are different, so they receive messages in different ways. So I have a question. So if you think about these different characters, and I don't know if we want to pick particular sustainability stories. Well, let's pick climate change because that's the most obvious one to start with. Do you think any of these kind of characters are more critical or might play a role if you were going to create a story around climate change and how you can change the direction that's going?
And the caretaker as well,
Yeah?
together.
Together. So how would they work together?
I think currently also there is a, when we for marketing and the notion of how you connect or how you attribute sustainability with all those things, because all these are things at the end, you play with emotional intelligence of people. But now there is a trend where we still need that. Alive. So we still have to play with emotional intelligence, but which is going to be more difficult now for brands. That people, this is also impacted by the digital thing, that people they want to enter into the brand. They want to make the brand about what they think, And actually Lego are work on this case. If you look at the end of 2000, beginning of 2000, Lego was almost dying. And then they change, etc. And there is a new CEO coming on story. And he decided to, so they go everywhere, on social media, or try to connect with people and try to get some feedback from them. And actually they realized that there was a lot of people that was loving Lego, but that was not manifesting themselves through the company. And then they try to gather all these people, so they open the door to the brain, and they let the people to create products, etc., and participate in the creation or going concern with the project. And for me, I think it's also the challenge nowadays, because of course it's good to open the brand, it's good to make to get adhesion from clients, etc. But the problem is it's not really also, the company is not a democracy. So how you are going to manage the risk, the multiple effect of the wish of everybody, you cannot contain everybody. And up to where or to which level you are going to open the brand.
Yeah.
And this is probably what is the most risk for or what we are doing about the differentiation, etc. Because there is so many, and I don't know if you probably read this report about Velocity 12. Velocity 12 is a company, is a polyGV or polyGV. So they are talking about the next billion of middle class. Actually, happening now in 2015 and 2025. And what is going to be the drivers of this new middle class? The 12 countries, let's say, on South Asia. And when you look at actually this report, there is the 5 main factors. You have the social habits changing, the way they consume. You have the demographic aspect, or macroeconomic aspect, and political change too. These countries that want to exit by their own, so mainly from the Muslim countries, with their own financing system. And this is going to drive the new economy. And the very important thing is that they want to consume their own brand. So even big international, big international brands, they are also at risk. And when you are thinking, for example, LVMH, you know this kind of new middle class, they tend to start to have problems with the LVMH market. Because they don't understand why I go to Paris and buy this product at that price. And if I buy it in Thailand, you know, why I should pay so more expensive? Or why a new product is going to be launched in France and why we cannot get it in Thailand? You know, they start to understand the business model that separate the world depending on consumers, and they don't like it.
But this is a shift of vocation. It's a shift from the global scene to a local scene. So the brands have to be constructed locally, but they still have to appeal to, they have to try to appeal to these.
I think it's challenging. Because if you look at, for example, LVMH, I start to have a problem with that. You know? Because for example, if you go to Italy, the way they produce product, etc. If you go deep, you realize that you have a small hall, etc. with plenty of Chinese garden inside. That doesn't have any right, that doesn't have, you know. So they are using cost model, little bit tricky. And this is start, you know, with Facebook, with internet, etc. You start to see that. So it's very dangerous.
People know that the manufacturing is not the
But
there's a growing realization. The manufacturing is not the thing.
Yeah, but the trend is that, for example, if you are a big brand, you go to Bangladesh, you set up a factory there. Okay, this is low cost, okay, you make works on children, etc. But in another point, you launch new economy, you know. It's better to have maybe $100 than $0. So this is discussable. But if you bring very cheap people, bring them in Europe with no right, nothing, this is not even their own country, you know, they don't even exist for the country, and you use them to produce something cheap, that's even worse than to open a factory in Bangladesh.
I have a point of view on some of that. I've done some research on some of that. By the way, so after earlier conversation, did you see that Lego launched an add-on? It's the first time they launched that. Anyway, on the kind of the later point you're making, I think it's true that the world is changing a lot. But I think it's also true, all the work I do, always keep it in mind that humans actually don't change as much as the environment around them. Certain fundamentals of human take millions of years to change as we evolve slowly. If at all, yeah. Which is one of the things that Homo Deus is talking about.
What I feel interesting in this time is right, I think there is always, I've always changed, it takes time. But which is interesting this time, the multiple factors combining in one at the same time. And this is this, you know, and at the beginning of the presentation, he was mentioning about the new millennials. But the problem is the change is not because of new generation. Of course, it's a factors. That is a market force who drives the change. And at the end, we talk about money investment. And those millennials, especially heirs, big family, starting to be in control and having big money, they want to invest differently than their parents. and they want to invest in impact, environmental things. And that's why this change is going to be faster probably.
But I want to go back to what you mentioned before, you all know the market. I think that there's two markets, there's a mass market and there's a higher income people market, and I think they behave very, very different. I mean, I can see also from my history, 30 years in industry, I used to sell a lot in middle, and in the United States, for example. Later on, it's either dollar store, Dollar Tree, or the highest, most expensive store. So I think on the high end, they want to see craftsmanship back. They want to see local production. But I think on the low end, which is the big masses, they don't care. And it's like two different worlds, actually.
But it's switch. Actually, this is what I said, that the next million of middle classes in Asia. If you're talking about Europe and USA, you don't have any middle class. You are
We
rich
have
or
still
poor.
have, still have.
No, you don't.
I mean,
They are not consuming anymore. The middle class in Europe or USA, they pay for the rich, the things they didn't pay, and then pay for the poor. So they are living on credit.
So you're talking specifically about Asia.
Asia is a new middle class consuming, and the country, the growth is led by the middle class.
Yeah, it's different places. But I'm not sure that I mean, I don't know to what extent in Asia you want to have local production.
I don't think it's about
I
that.
don't think about it's like crafting in your own place versus
If we switch, if you look at, for example, you are in a factory for textile, 10 years ago, or let's say, sorry, forget again, 20 years ago, you came here in Thailand, you came in Korea, you came in Taiwan, etc. for the cost. Then after they transfer everything from this country, from textile in China, and then now they get out everything from China to go in Pakistan and Bangladesh. It's cycle.
yeah.
I want to challenge Ray on this local brand thing. Because to me, I don't think it's just that local consumers want to buy local brands. The thing is that local brands express local values better than international.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's why they buy them.
Yeah, and they want also to buy for their own country to help.
Yeah, but I think in the end it's about the values resonate better.
Yeah.
And I've done a lot of work, for example, in Indonesia on beauty. There's one brand in Indonesia that's 4% market share. And it's not because they're made locally, it's because they feel local. And they're very different to international brands, and they're much more connected, much more culturally relevant. To go back to the point
They will even be ready to buy a little bit, maybe more expensive than.
No, they are,
Yeah.
for sure. So, I mean, specifically, actually, part of, I was just going to show you this case study, which comes on from this idea of care and nurture and protection, which we're talking about, which you can see as a sustainability value. So in Indonesia, if you talk to women about beauty and ask them specifically about inner beauty, which always comes up when you ask them about beauty, so about physical appearance, they talk about inner beauty. Okay, what is inner beauty? So this is I use a visual kind of projector to understand how people think implicitly. And you've got all this stuff here that comes out about what's inner beauty. It's about care, it's about nurture, it's about protection, it's about harmony. It's about helping your friends and neighbours and community. That's what inner beauty is about. It's a little bit about being smart as well, but that's in terms of knowing the right things to do and being a person that someone comes to for advice. That's also so very strong, and these are very strongly about interdependence and community and family. And we're working with a local brand. We wanted to basically identify as being about inner beauty, being implicit. I can't, by the way, they've actually had to change his brand name now. But this is the branding that came up around Because we also did a lot of research to understand that inner beauty is, it's not a dark colour, it's light colour, pinks and whites and pastels. It's soft and round, not harsh, and I can go on. It's very strongly associated with cats. It's very strongly associated with a few other things. With soft music, jazz music. But anyway, this is the brand came up with. These shapes are actually the items, because this brand was trying to create a brand across Indonesia, and one of the things, Indonesia is very diverse. These are actually the shapes of the islands of Indonesia.
They're overlapping.
All overlapping. Obviously you can see this logo. Solomon, so this is the name, so this is about being connected, yes, going into the new. Again, it's very kind of implicit and such. And then this is about climbing up, so it's also about achievement, doing something. That's the kind of active part of this, like inner beauty and helping people do. And as part of that, and Daniel prompted me to talk about this as well, in terms of this issue of sustainability. This brand was committed to spending, it was like 10% of the revenue, on supporting women in each of the 36 provinces of Indonesia who were strongly involved in local community movements and community support. What they call the Putri Settlements, Solomon princesses. So they had 7 when we were doing this work. They were going to identify one in every province of Indonesia who was actively involved in the community work. A large proportion of their revenues was going in to support these projects and these women, who were kind of brand ambassadors, but brand ambassadors who were not like celebrities, they were just people in their communities. So they're kind of like a different view of sustainability, but I think showing rather than telling, to go back to one of the points I made earlier. And of course these people are going to be active on social media, talking about the brand, etc. But also doing that, trying to get other women involved and consumers of the brand involved in these activities as well. So building them. Very interesting project. I thought I'd finish. So that's kind of all I was going to say about storytelling from the point of view of archetypes. And I was just going to show you, and this is just randomly, I googled sustainable brand advertising, picked up 3 or 4 ads. And I wanted to get your reactions to them. Because they're all sort of around the area of sustainability. But I want to go, not necessarily from an archetype point of view, just from a sort of general reaction point of view. So this is Coca-Cola. So Coca-Cola have made a big thing about basically not wasting water. I can't remember what's the phrase they use? Zero kind of. So basically putting back as much water as they use, essentially. What do you think?
I'm offended.
Okay.
I mean, basically, I'm drinking
I thought you
Coke,
would be.
I'm drinking it, and the only way I give it back is in the bathroom. So how does this thing work?
Has anyone seen this or seen any of Coca-Cola's?
It looks like Pepsi to me.
Okay.
Because
Pepsi
of
doing a similar thing.
the color itself, like in the
Oh,
old days,
okay,
it's
yeah,
blue
yeah,
and
yeah.
gray rather than all gray. That's one thing.
I hadn't thought of that, that's true. Has anyone seen? This is sort of sustainability. Sorry, I was struggling here to find that. So, this is more to the example I was using from Ireland. This is in that similar space. It's still organic. Ireland, also Danish, huh? Danish. quite a big company. They supply a lot of the retailers dairy products.
I like the simplicity. It looks,
It's got that, yeah.
yeah, the
side
arrows and all that, it kind of looks related.
Sorry?
What is it good for the plastic?
I've got my glasses on. Something sustainable future, I think that's it.
It's only good for Tesco.
I think with organic, they're using less pesticides and chemicals on the land. Sure.
Like a company like Tesco, you know, they're so exploitative.
I know.
You would not believe, you would never believe something like that.
So that's 0 out of 2 so far, is it? What about this one?
It's very sophisticated graphics. It's appealing.
And on the wording as well.
Yeah, everyone
can.
separating the world.
Do you think? Is it believable?
It's appealing instantly. It's like, before you think, it's appealing. Like with Tesco, I like, it was good, but it was like, oh, no. But this is just talks directly.
Maybe because you drink beer and not milk.
Maybe it's because,
Subconsciously.
maybe it's because I'm selling to Tesco.
Actually, sorry, I've just thought of one thing. To what you said. I don't know why this is how my mind works. You said caregiver and the rebel. And I think this is an issue of sustainability. You just reminded me of it kind of thought. I think one of the issues with, particularly with the environmental stuff, is you've got, actually basically we need to change if we're going to fix the problem. But everybody's, this is fear. People are afraid of change. That's the ruler. People value control because they're afraid of change. One thing's to say the same because it's more comfortable. So I think that's the inherent tension that's going on here.
There is also a company, you know, if they have a successful business model, they want to try to push it on the maximum because changing, meaning investing.
No, I mean, as Dr. Daniel has shown, there's some studies that show actually in the end it's more comfortable.
Yeah.
But it's just humans' behavior is difficult to change.
But not for the same generation.
Well, arguably it might be too late. Sorry, I interrupted there. It's just like kind of something remembered. Okay, this is the final one. This is not the only example of this from Patagonia. Quite interesting.
It's trying to just think that the right hand side is a bit, it's minimized.
Some versions of this are a bit more visual.
Yeah, bigger, more striking.
But it's kind of quite provocative, yeah?
Yeah.
And they do back this up. I mean, they're not, I think they've done some stuff to back this up. I certainly have read about things like they've been giving money to buy a parkland that was going to kind of get taken out of commission in the US as kind of natural park. And they basically give them the money so that it can stay as a sort of public resource. They give their employees a day off on election day so they can close their stores, which obviously has a big financial impact. So quite an interesting company.
There's also some sense in it because, you know, we're selling you more expensive jackets, but they will last you 10 years, not a year. This is an economically sensitive.
So which archetype would this be? Or archetypes?
Shape shifter.
think this could be a big caregiver and a big rebel, actually.
Yeah,
It's kind of quite rebellious type of
yes.
So this is my final.
Definitely will get hurt.
She wrote some great books. It depends if you're into science fiction and fantasy.
She's a fantasy.
She's also recently done a translation of The Telltale Chick. It's completely different, which is meant to be a really good translation. I think that was it. Yeah.
Great. So thank you so much, Dr. Gaines, Dr. McFarland. This on behalf of Sasin is just a small token of appreciation from us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
And a big round of applause for our speaker. So before you leave today, I'm not sure if you're asked the questions, but please also help fill out the evaluation forms. And our last week of the year is December 13th. We have a sustainable farm visit. I'm not too sure about the details, but they should be coming up in the newsletter emailed out to everyone by this week. So please do look out for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have one question.
We have plenty of time for more questions.
No, I just try to understand the macroeconomics of that. I mean, companies obviously want to make more money, or at least not less money, by doing good. So you get higher prices for that. I mean, you factor in this and then you add more. That's what you attempt to. I mean, that's what I would attempt to do. And I'm trying to think, what happens in the macro situation, money in the economy? Is it just money shifting hands? Does it, you know what I mean? The companies are not saying we'll have less profit. Nobody wants to. So you are charging for that. The consumer is paying for that. So what is it? Transfer from consumers to causes? I mean, maybe I didn't think about it. Where the money comes and goes, or just people are, instead of doing good things, they're just spending more on fancy brands with potential.
I think there's a time frame factor. If we're looking at a very small one, what's this?
Yeah, sure. That's awesome.
Sustainable businesses want to make a long-term position, expecting a fast return, trying to drive, responding to shareholders on a quarterly basis. It's generating this very short-term profits now and not looking to the long term. When they take a long-term perspective, there are these other factors they need to take into consideration. So I'm not sure. I don't think it's an easy answer, but it's around where do you expect your return? Do you expect the next few months, or do you expect it in 5 years, 3 years?
Of where I see problems. I want to give one example of where I see problems, and that is companies have. I see in one of the areas that I work with in my own is minority languages, revival of minority languages, and in some cases you have multiple NGOs or benefactors of such initiatives running towards the same purpose. You might have tribes in the north who have 10 different initiatives running after them. There's a question of how it's all coordinated. I think that's one thing to consider. A lot of social initiatives that could be uncoordinated. Nobody wants a central government that will take care of all that, but on the other, everyone wants to have his own story, his own thing. But sometimes you can have so many companies running after one slum, one tribe, one women, and whatever. You know, just that's one danger that I see.
It's, I was thinking about something else at the start of yours. On that particular thing, I think that was one of the things that was most interesting about working for the Irish Food Board. It's because the government finally are basically having that they're undertaking view. This is the kind of business we want to build. We want to make all the farms in Ireland sustainable, build this model of how it can work. That's why so that is was with the government. They're just taking a decision. This is what we need to do. On down to
This sounds very well thought out.
Yeah.
I mean, this sounds like something that is well thought
no,
out.
they have. I mean, they're still obviously, this is one of the, they were asked, because I kind of like came up in the conversation I had with them, where they asked me a lot of questions about what are Islamic values, because they were trying to get their heads around how that could work. But to me, it automatically made a lot of sense. On Dan's point, I mean, an analogy I would draw is if you look at some of the analyses of things like advertising effectiveness and marketing campaign effectiveness in the UK, they've done a lot of analysis which shows that when you have longer term campaigns, we're talking 3 to 5 years, so you plan and execute over the long term, it actually delivers much stronger ROI. And it allows you to do things like increase your price, gives you more profitability, at the same time shows that if you focus only on short-term tactical advertising, it produces short-term effects, but it's not sustainable. And I think there's an analogy with the sustainability thing there as well. There's like short-term tactics and there's long-term strategy. And in the end, long-term strategy actually has a bigger beneficial effect, but you have to be prepared to commit to a period of time. Yeah.
So my company always advertises, and you're going to choose to advertise on your store. You start from what you bet yourself.
Yeah.
And also when you say you are not a market, you have to care about your market first, what archetypes are they, and people want that kind of business for.
So, well, okay, so I think people buy brands